Anything else? 3 minutes after constructive speech, we have a period of time called cross-examination. That is your time to shine and be a super awesome debater, guys. Today, you'll be receiving a lecture based off of this outline. First part is going to be strategic purposes of cross-examination. Second part is going to be strategic preparation for cross-examination. Third is strategic execution, and fourth is strategic responses to cross-ex. Now, what do you notice is similar with all four of these sections? Strategic. There's a reason for that, which is on the next slide. But before we move on, just some notes. Some ideas and concepts are going to overlap, so if things seem a little repetitive, well, that's because everything is sort of connected with each other. You also notice this is a larger audience than what you've been used to. Novice, JV, and Open are all sharing the same lecture, so I'm going to do my best to accommodate each one. If you feel like it's not quite at your level, well, I'm doing my best to make sure that I can address everyone as best as possible. Your lab leaders will also have access to this PowerPoint too, so we are running a bit late on time. I am going to have to go through some slides fast. Just know that you will have access to all of these notes, this entire PowerPoint. If it feels like I'm going a little fast and there's too much text on the board, sorry about that, but we'll work with what we can. 4 usual problems to cross-examination. Firstly, people are often mistaken about the function of cross-examination. People usually think cross-examination is just like, oh, extra prep time, or I get to like ask random questions, I get to look cool, or just like, you know, do some flashy stuff. It's not really true. This leads into the second point. Cross-examination is strategic and not tactical. Anybody have an idea about the difference between strategy and tactics? Raise of a hand. No? When something is tactical, it is about achieving an objective, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but that's not your focus when it comes to cross-examination. When you're doing your cross-examination, you should have a plan. That's the difference between what do you call this? Strategy and tactics. Strategy is about having a plan overall, thinking about like the end game. Tactics are just little tricks you do that you can achieve, so that you can achieve objectives in a larger plan. People also often deliver cross-examination with faulty technique. We'll be going over that today. And most people tend to overlook the importance of cross-ex, and they mainly focus on the speeches. But policy debate is nicknamed cross-examination debate for a reason. It's the huge part, if not like the main, like star part of debate. It's the only time you have to interact with the other team too. During your speeches, you are not interacting with the other team. First section, 4 strategic purposes of cross-examination. First purpose is personal clarification. Cross-examination is an opportunity to clarify something you're confused about. For example, why did the US decide to trade with Taiwan in the first place, despite their 1982 agreement with China? Why did Trump decide to go through with this recently? Secondly, also understand warrants behind claims. Your opponents may be saying things that you just might not understand. You should probably ask about that. Why does selling weapons to Taiwan increase tensions between China and the US? It's a really simple slide. I think we can move on from here. Like I said, you'll have access to the PowerPoint, and we've got to get things going in this hour we have. Second purpose, judge clarification. Just like you should be clear on what's happening in the debate, the judge should be clear on what's happening in the debate. The judge might not have understood something in the debate, and honestly, sometimes chances are, if you don't understand what your opponent is saying, your judge might not be understanding what it's saying anyway. Cross-examination is the time to clue the judge in on what's happening in the debate. Maybe there's something even you or your partner are doing or saying that's confusing. You might not realize it. This is an opportunity to get your judge in on what's going on through your mind. You should also highlight when the other team isn't properly answering your question or questions or isn't really clashing with you. Get the judge in on this. You should also use this as an opportunity to highlight important points, certain disagreements or agreements. We'll be going over more about that later. You also want to take cross-examination time as an opportunity to present things you want the judge to evaluate. You are making cross-examination, remember, is also another speech. You are still making a point to the judge. You are getting a message across, even if your speeches are the main debate. And like I said, we'll be going fast. I know that's getting repetitive, but you'll have access to this PowerPoint, and we gotta move fast. Third strategic purpose, argument building. Cross-examination is an opportunity to start setting up your arguments for future speeches. It's also an opportunity to tie your opponents down. Both you as a debater and the opponents you'll face at some point, if not all the time, are going to strategically find ways to spin your arguments or to like sort of modify and change them, like explain them differently, simply because it's just the best way to win the round, even if you're lying about your arguments. Cross-examination is a time to make sure your opponent doesn't do that on you. So, for example, does the plan stop all weapon sales to Taiwan? If they answer no, you should probably problematize their plan text or their solvency because they're ceasing sales to Taiwan. If they answer yes, we stop all weapon sales to Taiwan, reference that later in the debate if they decide to go for a permutation and argue that it is severance. If they are stopping all sales to Taiwan, they cannot go for a permutation. They have already conceded they will not be selling a single thing to Taiwan. Also, feel free to raise your hand if you have any questions. This is a lecture about cross-examination. I'll invite cross-examinations of myself and questions for myself. This is a chance to also expose weaknesses in your opponent's arguments. For example, China and the United States have shared political tension for years among a multitude of issues. Why is this one problem so uniquely significant that it triggers nuclear war? Does that seem ridiculous to anyone? Thank you for one person who said no. Fourth purpose, impression formation. This is the only time the judge gets to see you interact with the other team. Cross-examination helps judges evaluate you as a debater. It shows them your personality. Are you an aggressive debater? Are you a calm, cool? Are you like calm, cool? Are you shy? Do you know what you're talking about? Are you unprepared? And remember, cross-examination is still a speech. This is your time to shine and perform. You treat it like it is a normal speech. If anything, you treat it as a super, super important speech. We still need this?
Yes, please.
All right. And like I said before, I promise you'll have access to this lecture to the entire thing. Can I move on? Yes. Now, 4 priorities of cross-examination from most important to least important. Your first and foremost priority in cross-examination, what do we think it is? What's that? Sorry, what? Understand their argument?
Tear apart.
Tear apart their argument? Can you tear apart their argument if you don't understand it? First priority is understand. You cannot debate what you do not understand. Well, you could, but it won't be excellently. For example, what is the AF's internal link to nuclear war? Or how does the AF prevent nuclear war with China? If you don't understand how that works, and then you're going to try to argue against it, it's probably not going to go well for you. Do not try to look cool by asking super flashy or tricky questions if you don't even understand your opponent's arguments. It's going to make you look a little silly. Bless you. Are we good? Second priority, now that you understand your opponent's arguments, you get commitment from them. This relates to the second strategic purpose of cross-examination, argument building. That's something else. You want to use cross-examination as an opportunity to get your opponents to admit things you can use to win in a debate. For example, getting them to say certain links, getting them to agree with certain things that you know for a fact disagree with your side. This is what we mean when we say you want to use cross-examination as an opportunity to nail down commitments to certain arguments. That way, like for example, when you're the negative, the affirmative is going to be doing the best they can to be saying, we do not disagree. Our plan is not that different from your CP, or we can do both. Your critique alternative is still really in line with our plan. We don't disagree that much. For your disadvantage, yeah, it's not really a link. Like, we're with you on that. You want to use cross-examination as a time to get them to admit things so that they can't take it back later, and you already can tell the judge, no, there are in fact disagreements here. Get them to commit to explanations, how something works, what the warrants are, what exactly something is, so they cannot change the story later. If they have a really ridiculous disadvantage that has a lot of internal links, a super vague impact, use this as an opportunity to really get them to explain it. If they fail to be able to explain it well, you call them out on it in the speech. Yeah. Example, when does the plan happen? If they say immediately, the plan happens as soon as you vote app, they cannot run a time frame perm on you. When do we stop selling sales to Taiwan? Or when do we stop, when does the plan happen? When do we stop selling weapons to Taiwan? If they say immediately, and you run your counter plan saying, we should reform how we sell weapons to Taiwan. If they go for a time frame perm and say, okay, you know what? We'll modify how we sell weapons to Taiwan, and then afterwards, we'll stop selling weapons to them. Remember how they already admitted that they are already going to stop selling weapons immediately? They have already changed their plan text. They've already changed their plan. They agreed that they are going to do it immediately, but now they're saying, oh, we're going to put some time first, and then we'll do it immediately. Severance theory is a different discussion, but this is just one example of how you can stop them from being able to do a time frame perm. Otherwise, it's abusive. Number 3, find warrants, then challenge them. Question?
About the time frame for how do you as apps not do it?
How do you not do that? When does the plan happen? I guess for me, it would depend on what arguments I know they're going to run, because that would change my answer. I basically lied. Or, yeah, literally. I would simply probably just, don't say it happens immediately. I don't know, add in some internal link explanation as to yeah, sure, the plan happens, once these mechanisms of action happen, blah, 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 we can still combine that with the permutation, or just run a different permutation besides the time frame. Yeah, so number 3, find warrants and challenge them. Ask them questions about reasons and warrants they use to support their points and claims, then challenge them. You want to find out why they argue X, then poke at the reasons. An example scenario, can you explain the internal link between China's rise to power and war with the United States? They say, China's rising military power predicts their ability to militarily contest the United States. So we wanted to find out why they argued something. We asked them about it, they gave us a reason, then poke at that reason. Why would China consider nuclear war with the most powerful military on the planet a worthy risk? And notice that when you ask questions, you are sort of framing it in such a way that it sets them up to look bad, or it sets up their argumentation to look faulty. I gotta move on now. 4, test and preview arguments. It's the last priority, but it is something that you can do. You can start to challenge some of the reasons and warrants like we discussed on the previous slide. You start to determine whether, you can start testing out certain, if you want to go for the critique, try asking some questions that sort of poke at the app from the lens of the critique. Start poking at questions of hegemony, if you're setting up the hegemony DA. From there, you can determine whether your opponent seems strong or weak against your arguments, and then you can determine what you want to go for or what you do not want to go for anymore, or you can change the order of the 1 and C. If you feel like the DA is going to be a super weak option, put it at the bottom of the 1 and C. If you think that they are not answering your DA questions well or seem weak against it, put the DA near the top. And then based on the responses, figure out, is X something I want to go for? Is it something I want to prioritize? Can I move on? This one I was a little fishy about whether I wanted to include this, but sometimes sports analogies are a little helpful because I know a lot of high school students, you Play sports. One example, we'll go over 3 analogies. One is time of possession. In case any of you don't understand this, you basically want to make sure your team has the ball for most of the game. When you're playing basketball, when your team has the ball, it's like time of possession for your team. You are basically in control of the ball. You get to determine the shots, this and that. The other team is sort of forced to defend themselves. If it's your ball in football, the other team is basically sort of pressured to like defend against your offense. You are basically in control of the game. You want to control the time of possession in cross-X. And this does not apply just to when you're asking questions. It applies to when you are answering questions. If the other team is trying to ask you questions and you just keep on one-upping them and you look like a very strong, powerful debater, that is still, that's still a great use of cross-examination. I know I said cross-examination is a speech, and you would think that like, oh, this is like my speech if I'm the one answering questions. There's this phrase that goes all around all the time, like, excuse me, this is my cross-ex? Like, everybody, like, raise your hand if you've ever heard that. Yeah, it's the most overused thing, right? You'd be like, like, no, this is my cross-ex too, I'm talking. When you're answering questions, nah, don't believe that stuff. This is your cross-X too when you're answering questions. You own that time, that's all you. Make sure you're on offense for most of the game. Yeah, because remember, cross-examination is a competition of making a better impression. Who is getting their message out better? If they're asking you questions, who? You're still on the offense. They're lucky to be asking you questions. Like, them asking you questions is actually your time to be talking to the judge. Field position. Basically, you want to be in a sort of strategic spot. You want to be in an advantageous position against your opponent. Protect your goal, don't let them get past your defenses. Keep pressure on the other team always. Find ways to make sure that you're always in control of the situation. Keep cross-X territory, keep cross-X in your territory of the field. These are a bit abstract, so I don't really think we need to spend a lot of time on them. It's just like to help you get the idea across conceptually. Third is assist to turnover ratio. Assist is basically in sports when you sort of help your team members score. Turnover is when your team loses the ball. Because, it's when your team loses the ball and it gets in control with the other team. So what you want to set up your partner and your team to score more points. Use questions to set up your partner to score, to win arguments, to make them more strongly. And don't turn over the ball too much by thinking unthoroughly. It's good to let go of the ball sometimes. You might mess up on a question here, might mess up on an answer there. You lose the ball, that's fine, keep your cool. You'll get it back eventually. You're better than them. Otherwise, the other team gets to score too many times. You don't want that. You want to have way more assists of setting up your team to score than you want mistakes that give the control of cross-examination up to the other team. You don't want them to have the ball. Second section, strategic preparation for cross-examination. Preparation? What? You mean you actually have to prepare ahead of time for cross-ex? I thought that was just speeches. No. Cross-examination is a speech too. I've said that at least 7,000 times, so I hope it sticks in someone's brain somewhere. So just like a normal speech, in cross-examination, you should have a strategy, not a plan. That's a mistake, that's a typo. You should have a plan of questions, a strategy of questions prepared ahead of time. Do not just improvise and brainstorm your questions on the spot. You should also have research to reference. In the same way, in your where you are referring to research and citations in your 1AC and 1NC, and then eventually in the 2NR and 2AR, where you're like, our Adams evidence indicates that the internal link between the uniqueness and impact, blah, 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 this and that. You should be referring to research when you are asking questions. I don't know, like, your Melissa evidence indicates a line here saying that economic advancement is going to be the key to human survival. How does this conflict with questions of value to life, etc., blah, blah, blah? Like, if you are literally mentioning just citations when you are answering questions, like referring to your evidence when you're answering questions or asking questions, makes you look really good. It shows mastery over your own evidence. You should predict their arguments and prepare questions to pressure them on weaknesses. And you should actually practice your cross-examination. In the same way that you practice giving your 1AC or 1NC and you're timing it, you give 2AR redos to an R redos to see like, where did I mess up? How do I improve it? Do that with cross-examination. I used to do this with my friends all the time at Bravo. Bravo fam, what's up? Wow, that's the most noise that's happened so far. I should have done that earlier. I would literally just be walking with Eric. Oh, Eric was my partner at Bravo. He's not here right now. He's coming later because he sucks. But yeah, we would literally just like be like we would just literally be like walking to Starbucks or something and just like asking each other practice questions. Yeah, actually, let's move on from there. You can find ways to strengthen your cross-ex plan, feel more mentally prepared when you do that. Section B. Preparing for answering. Make explanations in cross-ex and your speech is the same. Cross-examination should not contradict your speech. For example, do not argue in your speech that nuclear war is the biggest impact in the debate, and then say in cross-examination, oh, well, I guess it's not as important as climate change. Yeah, vote for that instead. It shows weakness and confusion to the judge, and it's also just a little confusing. If you're trying to weigh nuclear war, or if you're trying to weigh climate change as like an existential impact that outweighs anything else to set yourself up for the impact calculus debate, and take that W, it's going to be a lot harder when you have already, and it just looks kind of bad too for your credibility, when earlier in your speech you were saying no, nuclear war was the most important thing. If your opponent is running a nuclear war impact and you've already conceded nuclear war is the most important impact in the debate, makes it a lot harder for you to be able to weigh climate change as more important to get them to vote for your side. Also, both team members should be prepared to answer every question independently. Otherwise, if one person does all of the answering or most of the answering, it makes the other person look weaker. And even though that other person looks a little bit better, it makes the team look collectively weaker. The whole team, both partners, seem weaker for not properly preparing or strategizing together. Sometimes it's nice to have like a person like be the leader and in charge and this and that, but it starts to affect them too, even if they're the ones who are looking good. So yeah, whether you are the younger, less experienced debater, or whether you are the older debater, you should try to figure out a balance between the both of you for answering questions and asking questions. So, tag team is okay. Those of you who don't know what tag team debate is basically tag team cross-ex is when both debaters are answering questions and asking questions. And that's fine for the most part, especially in my opinion too, particularly. But overall, it's considered strategically less preferable for the reasons that we said above. Besides, one partner should be prepping for the next speech while your partner is the one who's handling the questions. You should also know answers to common questions like, why vote after neg? Raise your hand if you've ever heard that question. Yeah, super common. You should already know the answer to it. You should be able to practice that with your teammates. Why should we vote af? Why should we vote neg? When does the plan pass? How many of you have heard that question? When does the plan pass? Raise your hand if. Now this one's a little tricky one. Like it used to be a bit more popular before. If the plan's so good, why hasn't it passed yet? Anyone heard this before? Yeah, be ready for those. Be like, they think they're gonna be sneaky on you. Be like, I've heard this like a million times. Like, destroy them on that. Next section. I promise you'll have the PowerPoint. I promise you'll have all the notes. Just ask your lab leader. They don't? Okay, well, I will personally send a personal message out to the staff just for all of you because I love you all. Okay. Okay, like when I'm actually giving the lecture, no one's making noise, and then the most random things making noise. Is like, should I just give like not the lecture? No, you're all going to be amazing cross-ex debaters after. So, next section is strategic execution of cross-examination. How do we actually do it? Part A to this is demeanor. Demeanor is sort of your character, how you appear to the judge. Do you seem cool? Do you seem aggressive, shy? Remember the 3 C's. Cedric. Just kidding. Calm, confidence, concentration. Keep pressure on the other team mentally, not yourself. Even faking the 3 C's can get you far, and it has gotten me far, or it's at least worked a couple times in my experience. What do you call this? There have been so many times where, like, when I was in college, I debated someone way older I knew was way more experienced than me, and I knew I was gonna get my butt kicked. That didn't stop me from trying to fake my way out of it. Honestly, even if you're feeling super nervous, even if you feel like you don't know what you're talking about, I was scared, like, oh, they're gonna see right through me. They're gonna know for a fact I don't know what I'm talking about. Still go through with it. Keep a straight face. You know, like, just act like their arguments don't make sense, or just have like a sort of confused face. Project your voice and make yourself louder. Have maybe even if you have a slightly confrontational tone behind your tone of voice, sometimes even the bad questions seem a bit stronger. I've had so many times where I knew a debater was gonna kick my butt, but then I just asked the question a certain way, and they were like, what's that? Well, I hope it wasn't like what's that smell? But like, oof, I wasn't expecting that. But like, yeah, honestly, fake it, fake it till you make it. A strong debater is a calm, cool debater. Unless your type of personality is more of an exciting, high-energy debater, super convicted, super passionate, but there is a correct way to do this. Now, you'll notice here, it says be aggressive, but then I cross that out. It says be assertive instead, but nice. I think there's a difference between being an aggressive debater because that comes off as very mean. We don't want you to be a jerk. But there's a difference between being aggressive and being assertive. Anyone have an idea what the differences could possibly be? One's nicer, one's meaner. One's just arguing, the other one uses facts.
Aggressive is more like you're trying to come for them personally.
Okay, come for them personally. And tone is a big thing. Yeah, like, your plan sucks! It doesn't make any sense! Like, explain to me your trash app, please. That's way different than something, yeah, like, that's way different than something, well, I think you get the point. There's a difference between being mean and aggressive, and being strong and collected and asking things calmly. Now, sometimes if the other person is just talking over you and they're being the aggressive one and they're not letting you talk, oh, explain to me blah 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 blah. Oh, this and that blah blah. Okay, wait, can I just put something? Anyone ever been in a situation where the other person just doesn't shut up? Sometimes a really cool trick that I learned to do is just is just literally saying the person's name. And then it's just and then you'll notice they'll sometimes have this reaction oh yeah, so the plan does this. I know you're, yeah, but I'm answering the question, blah, 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 Cedric, oh. It's like a dog hearing their name called, yeah, I heard my name. Sometimes it can piss the other team off too, but honestly, if someone's not keeping their cool in a debate, they're already losing their own mental game. Other things to say besides their name? Well, there is the overused word of, this is my cross-accent. Because that's just not true. Well, I mean, if you're answering questions, you want to say that's not true. If you are asking questions, you want to say that's true. But, they keep talking, yeah. Honestly, sometimes just looking at the judge, or just straight up being, there have been so many times where I just I get especially when I'm debating certain white teams from really rich schools, really private schools like Northwestern Georgia or Georgetown. I really hate that. I don't stand. I get mad and I'm just no, don't talk over me. Straight up tell them to their face don't talk over me. I'm asking questions or let them ramble. Look at the judge, make eye contact, be are you done? Can I ask my question now? Makes them look bad, otherwise it just shows that they're uncooperative. Ask questions the judge would ask. This is related to judge clarification, the second priority of strategic cross-ex. This allows you to connect with the judge if you're doing your job, if you're doing their job for them. If you're asking questions that the judge would like to ask but can't because they're judging and they're not a debater, and you're doing the work for them, this makes you look super good. Honestly, judges love it. Or just like a really strong debater. Like the image of a really strong debater is the debater who's reading the judge's mind. Usually people think of like the judges up here and the debaters are down here. If you are doing this, if you're demonstrating in cross-ex, you and the judge are on the same level. You are just wondering the exact same thing about these other teams' arguments. Doesn't make sense, like blah, 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 this and that. If you are on the same page as the judge and the other team just looks like, huh? That makes you look super strong. I think I saw a hand up here. I think I saw a hand up here. Nah? Part B, content. Part 1 of Part B. Remember, like I said, cross-examination is a strategy and a plan. It's not just on-the-spot random questions. First, you decide what you want to argue. Then, you choose questions. How do you know if something is a good question? A question is only a good question if it's going to help you win the debate. You want to ask yourself before your cross-examination, before you go into a round with cross-examination, ask yourself, what is the point of this cross-ex? What do I want by the end of it? Have a goal. You should not be asking questions just to fill up time to buy time for your partner. You should be figuring out, what do I want to strategically accomplish here? What argument do I want to set up? What weakness do I want to set up? Do I want to prevent them from making the permutation, this type of permutation? Do I want to prevent a link turn? Do I want to prevent an impact turn? Do I want to show that the affirmative can never be in line with the alternative? Ask questions that keep in mind what will be in the end game, the last two rebuttals, the most important speeches in the debate. Get warrants for impact calculus before they can even address it, for example, or figure out impacts they'll go for on framework so you know ahead of time. Can I move on? Okay. Yeah, we gotta move on, y'all. Sorry if it's going a bit fast. You'll have access to the entire thing. I will personally send out a message that a lot of students wanted their lab leaders to give them this lecture. Take necessary prep time before cross-examination if you really need it, honestly. Like, it's not ideal, but if you really, it's better to go into it's better to take some prep time before cross-examination starts, collect your cool, figure out a strategy and a plan, than to just go right into it, jump into it, you know, hoping that like you don't drown. You need to have a plan. And you should prioritize your questions based off of, you know, what arguments will they go for, what seems the strongest, those are things you want to figure out. Prep your sequence of threads, like a sequence of topics you want to go through in cross-examination, and determine how long you're willing to stick to a thread. That way, when you know ahead of time, who's ever been in a situation where the other team just keeps on stalling or tiptoeing around a topic, or they're not giving you exactly what you want? Yeah, I see some hands, yeah. You want to determine ahead of time how much time do I want to commit to this one topic before we finally move on, because I have a lot of other things to get to. And do not save your biggest questions for the end. Also applies to your speeches. Don't save your biggest, this wins the debate at the bottom. Some people like to do that for dramatic effect. No, just put it for the top. It's the first priority. Attacking their worst card, you're trash. Can we go over your first trash piece of evidence and now your second garbage piece of evidence and then your third piece of feces? No, that's not necessarily productive. Sometimes it can make you, sometimes people do this because it makes the other team look bad and it makes you look good because you're just roasting the other team. But this isn't always productive. So, because it's if evidence is trash, you should not be wasting time just showing how trash it is. If it's trash enough for you to go on it for so long to call it trash, it's probably worth moving on. Often the reverse is better, where ignore their trash cards, save it for your speech, and then you can poop on them for that. Sometimes going on their first best card and then their second best card, then their third is a much better strategy. Why would we think that? Why would it be better to do the reverse?
It shows, gives you a chance to show just how bad their best arguments are. I
like that. It shows how bad even their best pieces of evidence are.
Yeah, to essentially find the weakest points within their best arguments that they're making.
Yeah, finding weakest points. Clash, yeah. This is also an opportunity to be able to find out how are they going to use this piece of evidence later in the speeches, right? If you're already starting to wiretap into like, oh, this is how they use this evidence, this is how they explain it, you're already going to be prepared for the later speeches, how they are going to use it against you. A successful strategic cross-examination is much better than a successful tactical cross-ex. It might be a nice tactic to just go for their worst stuff first and just trash them on it, but sometimes in the broader plan, it's better to just like, you know what, I'm not gonna even go over your trash arguments. Let's go over the best, your strongest ones that you want, that you're going to be using against me, so I know ahead of time how to answer it. Cross-examination is also not a place to win arguments. Leave that to your speeches. This is a place to highlight differences and disagreements. Leave the argument winning to your speech time. Cross-ex is when you show where you disagree, where you agree. For example, you want to show things like, you want to show in cross-ex, their plan does this, our CP does that, it's different. Their alt does this, our alt does this, which is why they cannot perm. They have said that this is the most important impact in the debate. That proves that they cannot go for the other one, or it's not as important, or something like that. Who has ever been in a cross-examination round, whether you have done it, you can be honest, whether you've done it or whether the other team has done it, they asked a bunch of questions on one topic that they didn't even end up talking about later. Now, sometimes this is called a fake out. An example of this is you and your partner were never going to run topicality in the first place, but you ask a lot of questions related to definitions of the resolution so that the other team thinks that you're going to run topicality because you want to make them waste a little bit of prep time. Honestly, this doesn't work well against good or experienced teams. It might help you like when you're first beginning, you know, why not? Just do it. Debate is a game. It might work in the beginning, but once you get to higher levels of debate, the best teams or the really good teams are just going to like, oh, take like 15 seconds of prep to just like change the order or just take something out or just like skip something. It really doesn't help you. You could be using that time better strategically for all the other reasons we've been discussing. Part C, technique. Okay. I'm gonna have to start going a little faster just to let you all know. Sorry, I'm giving you a lot of heads up though. Ask closed-ended questions. Do we know what a closed-ended question is? Someone give me an example. Yes or no questions?
Is the sky blue?
Is the sky blue? That's another yes or no question. Yes or no questions are like the easiest examples of closed-ended questions. A closed-ended question is when you ask a question and it's pretty much just like it's like a set finite answer. An open-ended question is like, why is your app good? A closed-ended question is, Well, I think you get the Sorry, it's the morning still. I'm not used to waking up this early. A closed-ended question could be something as simple as like, what is the status of the counter plan? They can only give one answer. It's conditional, it's unconditional, it's dispositional, etc. Do not ask them questions that let them waste time and ramble. This asking closed-ended questions also gets them to commit to arguments that you prevent them from being able to change and spin out of later. If you want to clarify a DA advantage or like a DA/advantage story or scenario of an advantage or a DA, do not ask them, explain to me your DA. Do not ask them, so like, how does nuclear war happen? Honestly, if you're trying to point out that an argument is like super ridiculous, you provide the scenario, then ask them, is this accurate? Or clarify with them, right? Like, there's a difference between this. I'm gonna demonstrate. So like, yeah, your hedge disad says that we'll have like great power wars, but you don't seem to have much explanation for it. Can you give a time frame for it or internal link for that? And then they'll just answer, oh yeah, sure, so essentially our plan entails blah, 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 which would occur over X amount of time leading to blah, 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 blah. That's way too much. Sounds a lot weaker than something like, so let's clarify the hedge DA because it seems to rely on a lot of unexplained internal links. In order for the plan to cause the impact, the stoppage of sales to the single small country of Taiwan would have to be so massive that it destroys our military and economic capabilities to the crucial point of losing our #1 spot some country or multiple countries that you leave unspecified would have the guts to challenge the supremacy of the most powerful military on the planet. Other countries would then need socioeconomic political conditions set up whereby they would feel compelled to compete with each other for the #1 hegemon spot in the world. Those countries would then have to have enough incentive to destroy each other at war and spend money on that. Those countries would also need to have been previously intimidated by US intervention, thus explaining the hypothetical scenario that they go to massive wars with one another because the United States decided to stop selling weapons to one small country. Is that accurate? Now, that was probably a bit long, and you could probably make that a bit more efficient, but I think that gets the point across, right? Does that sound like a good DA to you after I asked that question? It doesn't sound like a good DA to me. So, especially if it's a ridiculous sounding story, don't ask them, I don't get your DA, can you explain it? Oh, see, Judge, I can't explain it well. No, you just make the story for them. And ask the judge. No matter what their answer is, the judge already got your point. It's a ridiculous sounding DA. Only ask open-ended questions once commitments have been established. Once your period of closed-ended questions has ended, and challenging of arguments commences. So remember, go down that list of priorities, 1, 2, 3, 4. Once commitments are established, then you can start asking open-ended questions. Part C, part 2 of part C. Be organized. Don't do this thing where you're like, all right, so on the hedge DA, I got this question, blah, 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 blah. All right, next, I got a question on the critique, this, that, blah, blah, blah. Oh, okay. All right, let's go back to the hedge DA. All right, actually, no, topicality, no, don't do that. Don't go back and forth between topics. Have your plan ready, have your strategy ready. Do not win cross-ex on the spot. And do not allow the opposite team to recover after their speech. So sometimes you'll notice you'll have a debate where it's just like, those countries would have been intimidated by US intervention. And then like the speech ends and they're like, whew, like, you know, then you have this awkward period sometimes like, yeah, don't let that happen. Don't let them get their rest time. You look a lot stronger when as soon as they sit down from the speech or they want to take a break from the speech, like, whew, you know, like they're all tired, they're sweating, because debate is an aerobic sport, right? You know, like, right? Imagine like as soon as the speech finishes, after the speech finishes, they're talking, right? They finish, whew, stand up. All right, first question I have on the dissad. You make no sense on this explain to me this entire chain of internal links that leads to this great power wars impact that has no specific, they're just like, oh, wait, I wasn't ready for that. You know, like, they're not mentally prepared for that. You want to keep them on their toes. You also don't want to let the judge get bored. There's way too much free time that happens in debates because judges are just waiting for the debaters to be ready. If you're ready and the other team is not ready, you look a lot better in cross-examination. That increases your ethos. Keep pressure on the other team. Debate is a war. Next, identify disagreements. We've already talked about this before. Who's ever seen like these Law and Order shows or these judge shows where there's like this one badass lawyer who's just pressuring the witness or pressuring the suspect, like, admit it, you did this and that, blah blah blah, like anyone, and then eventually they break down okay, fine. Like, he abused me when I was, this and that, you know what I'm trying to say? Who's ever seen something like that? Like, they've seen the show like that, right? Do not do that in debate. You are never going to have a team who is going to roleplay that, in debate, both teams are going to try to prove the other person wrong. You're never going to be in a situation where, admit it, your DA sucks, doesn't it? And they're just, I've never seen a debate round go, oh my god, you're so right, we're just trash. I don't even know why we decided to run that DA. We should have just gone for the, I don't know, man, just, okay, we lose. I'm worthless. You're never going, don't try to get them to admit that they're wrong and you're right. And if they do that, well, chances are they were bad enough that you were going to win anyway, or you're just that, great. Do not ask questions like, don't you think blank? Isn't it true that, not true? You think they're going to say yes? They're not going to say yes. ask them more direct questions the way that we've been talking about before. I keep going on this, but anyway, last point I want to get over before we move on to the next section. Prevent evasion. Pay attention to whether they're answering your questions or dodging questions. Call them out on it. We talked about this before. If you are asking a question, they start to ramble, straight up attack it. Like, if you notice they're not answering your question, be like, okay, that doesn't answer my question. I'm asking you blah, 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 blah. They give an answer, they keep rambling, like, okay, but can you answer this part? Do that a few times. If they keep on dodging the question, either move on, or you can even mention it. Be like, all right, so far, that's been 3 times I haven't gotten a question. I'll go on to the next one. Honestly, that's it. Simple. Oh, I guess there's still part 3. Ask them questions so their answers are your links. You want to trap them to conceding certain things. We talked about this before. Also, requesting lines of evidence isn't always productive when you're like, can you point me to somewhere in your card that says blah, 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 blah? What happens when you do that? Who has ever been in a debate where their opponents were like, can you show me the card that says this, or show me where in your evidence it says blank? Anyone? Yeah. Sometimes, what usually happens? Anyone ever, raise your hand if you've ever seen something like this, where it's like, oh, where is that? Okay, yeah, let me just pull that up. You can ask more questions if you want while I find this. Don't do that! If they start doing that and they start wasting your pep time, that was your fault. You should not have done that. The judge gets bored, it wastes your time, it invites stalling. Ask about the actual argument itself, not the card. The only time you should really be doing that is if it is so crucial of a question that it has to be in that it's key to the rebuttals. You should only be doing that if it's absolutely necessary for you to win something, to win the debate. Do not ask about dropped arguments. What is a better option? Yell it out. Call them out when? When? Call them, yeah, the rebuttals, your speeches. Do not ask about dropped arguments. All that does is remind your opponents, oh, we should start prepping on that now. No, don't let them know that they dropped something. Just go for, at the point where they dropped it, there's nothing for you to address. They have already conceded whatever argument that you made. You just explode on it later. Use that cross-ex time to talk about things that they actually mentioned during their speech. Yeah. The person who's not cross-exing should be preparing. They should not be continuously listening and eavesdropping and answering questions. They should be focused on prepping their own speech. The other partner is the person who's giving the speech. Oh, giving the cross-ex. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. I know. We're actually kind of running a bit early-ish on time. Yup. I should start keeping a tally how many applauses I get that aren't related to the lecture. Because I mean, I'm glad I'm getting applauses. They're just not related to the lecture, which makes me a bit concerned, but I'm glad you all like me outside of when I'm talking about debate stuff. All right. Part 4. Strategic responses to cross-examination. So we went over... Wait a second.
How many parts are there?
4 parts, remember? Oh, wow. Oh, wow, we are kind of running early. I mean, we can always, go, if we need to return back. No, oh my god. Moses is back! I don't know what I'm gonna do with these tallies, but they're fun to keep track of now. Yeah, if we have extra time, we can just go over. You'll either have an earlier break, or we'll go over stuff that we have questions about. Strategic responses to cross-examination. This is part one. If a debater needs help, if you need your teammate to jump in, or if you need to jump in and help your teammate out answering a question, they should not jump in ideally. I mean, if it happens a couple times, that's fine. But rather, sometimes the better ethos-looking thing is the debater is inviting the teammate in. There's a difference between Eric is talking blah blah, and I'm doing my preparation time blah blah, and they're just like, what's the status of the CP? And he's like, I'm like, unconditional! Unconditional! Like, that is way different than something like, what is the status of the CP? Actually, I think Cedric might be better at answering that. Cedric, what do you think, huh? That invites me in, and then you see how it shows Eric as less weak, as in, oh, I can't answer my own questions. It shows he's so controlled over his own cross-examination. And it also shows that, like, I'm not being a total butthole, who's just, being super arrogant and stuff. I've been called that a couple times, but I guess it's deserved. Number two, look the judge in the eye, not at your opponent. For the novices who are out there, or JV who are at their first camp or something, in case you haven't learned this, whatever level you are, you will learn policy debate is an extremely weird activity. It also makes you really socially weird. I mean, aside from the fact that you are known as like the debate team kids, and we made onto that movie. Like you are those kids in the movies. I mean, aside from that, policy debate teaches you to do a bunch of weird things that you would not do real life socially. For example, aside from things like, if the debater needs help, the teammate should not jump in the debater shit. Like, aside from doing weird things like that, even in cross-ex, in a normal conversation, we look at each other when we're talking, right? I'm talking to you, we're looking at each other. No, but for some reason in cross-ex debate, we do this instead. What's your name again? Maria. Even though I'm looking at you, what's your name? Karina. So Maria, I have this question for you. Can you explain your trash critique, blah, blah, blah? Like, we have this weird thing in debate where we're not actually looking at the person we're talking to, we're looking at the judge. Why do we do this? Any ideas? Or I guess it's already up here, isn't it? But go ahead. You're trying to convince the judge, not the other person. You're never going to convince they're never going to,
oh wait, what? You want to include the judge in your conversation.
You want to include the judge in your conversation. I'm going to take that one step further. You're not even including the judge in the conversation. You're having a conversation with the judge. This other person, Maria, like, the real conversation's right here between me and you. You and I, we're on the same level. Maria, she's trying, it's cute, but like, no, she's like, it's not. Or like, if I'm gonna ask Karina questions, it's just like, Maria, like, you and I, we know what's up. Like, we're the what, like, you understand like how this DA doesn't make sense. Like, even though I'm asking Karina. Yeah, this one engages the judge and makes them feel less left out. And you kind of want to treat the other team as though they're just that leftover person who's not part of the conversation. You want to act like you are asking questions on the judge's behalf. You are answering the questions on the judge's behalf in a conversational format. Like, if that's the debater over here, and I'm asking them questions, it's just like, so can you actually explain a specific country that initiates global power wars after the United States loses its hegemony? Because so far we just kind of have this vague impact, Like, it's sort of like, I'm talking with the judge, we're on the same level, the other debater is just like a prop, a little toy for you to play with while you're actually talking with the judge. Also, think before you speak. I have problems with this all the time. That's not just debate, but like, there is no need to rush your answers. Sometimes I remember debating this one girl, and I would be asking like, so why is this blah 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 blah? Why is this blah 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 blah? And she just goes like, oh, well, yeah, like the CP doesn't link because otherwise this and that blah blah blah, environmental destruction, like, and she just looks so out of control. Like she just felt like sometimes debaters don't get out of speech mode. In speech mode, they're like super intense, they're super fast, they're super like running on adrenaline, and sometimes the adrenaline just stays stuck with them. and then they sort of treat cross-ex like they're spreading a speech. Cross-examination is a speech, but it's a different kind of speech. If you're spreading in your speech, or if your brain's like everywhere, you can honestly take a bit before you answer questions. If it's better to take a second to think first before answering a question than quickly answering something really bad or something really harsh. An example, like, so, what should debate look like? Imagine you're in a critical debate, and this is a question of framework. If you need some time to think, or like, you know, like a few years ago, there was this like Cuba topic, and they're like, what is your relationship to Cuba? Huh, I don't know, that's gonna take me a bit to think, hold on. Well, I would personally say, as a Filipino, blah, 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 or, you know, growing with that, you know, family, like, you know, you can take a second to think, or like, what is the most, between magnitude, probability, and time frame, what comes first? Well, I would probably say, based off of the way that we've articulated this impact so far, we would probably say time frame is much more urgency than magnitude and probability, something like that, right? It's cool, just take a second. You don't have to always answer each question on the spot. I think there's this like, I haven't actually seen the research, but I think it's like, people give themselves 30% time less to answer a question or to respond to someone than other people would, if that makes sense. Like on average, you probably give 30% more time for someone else to answer you than you would give yourself to answer someone else. So sometimes time actually goes faster in your own brain when you're thinking about yourself than someone else would. I don't have a clock up here. Anyone know what time it is? Oh, thanks. That's simple. Part 2. Be honest if you don't know something. Sometimes you're not going to know everything. Dishonesty can lose you a debate by giving bad answers. If you give an accidental, like, bad answer and you just straight up lied because you didn't know something, that could be a super crucial concession that they were looking for. It could be a huge screw up for your team. Just be like, I don't know. So who initiates this great power war after the United States loses hegemony? Now let's say you and your teammate could have done some better prepared research or were just not prepared for that type of question. You can take a second, well, to be honest, I'm not sure, but you can be honest about not knowing an answer to a question. The way you deal with that is you be honest, say, I'm not sure, I don't really know, and then have a but statement. And you explain why it doesn't matter even though you don't know that specific thing. You know, I'm not sure which country would start it, but the Williams evidence discusses how if the United States loses hegemony, we have this set of countries who have these interests, blah, blah, blah. So even though we haven't named an official country, we can provide more evidence for an official one later. We just know that there are socio-political economic conditions set up that create the conditions of possibility for nuclear war. You know, like, does that sort of make sense? Don't overreach. This is similar to number 4, like above. You want to just be honest and level. Do not exaggerate or BS answers. We know what that stands for, bull spitting, right? You do not want to bull spit answers to make a point. Otherwise, the judge can tell, and the other team can tell. In the same way, if the other team is starting to exaggerate answers or starting to BS answers, you should call them out on that too. If anyone is going for an extinction impact, call them out on like, call them out on like, where did you get that internal link for extinction? I'm kind of conflicted between telling you all like you should be going for extinction for your nuclear war and climate change impacts, you know, outweighing the other team. But at the same time, I don't think a lot of you have evidence for it, so call out the other team for not having evidence on that. Or explain why you don't need evidence for it, or explain how your evidence somehow explains it anyway. Reference your evidence and citations when answering questions. We talked about this before. It ups your credibility. It shows your preparation and mastery over your research and arguments. Number 7, contest false premises. Sometimes really sneaky debaters will do this thing like, so given that China and Taiwan are already highly cooperative now, why is the plan necessary? Contest the premise. Take a step back and be like, hold on. Before I even answer that question, like, I want to challenge that premise first. China-Taiwan tension is still high. We've indicated in our blank piece of evidence they're not cooperating right now. If you're going for a capitalism critique, or if the other team's going for capitalism critique, given that poverty, given that capitalism decreases value to life, can you explain the internal link between free markets and job satisfaction, blah, blah, blah? Take a step back and be like, okay, hold up a second. Let's address that first part you tried to sneak in. And then, suggest some information that explains how, capitalism actually does increase value to life. I don't know, employment is not actually exploitation, it's an equal exchange. These are not my actual views. I'm not saying they are, my views are not my views, but I'm just example. And then number 8, who's ever been in a situation where the other team is just, oh, you have a question? Oh, you're just I agree, yeah, gotcha. Who's ever been in a situation where you're up there answering questions, you're like, oof, I'm ready, let's go, and then the other team gets up and they're just like, can you explain your DA? And then you explain it, blah, blah, this and that, and they're like, okay, cool. Let's see here. Raise your hand if you've ever seen a team member who's just standing up there, just like, check my phone right now. Yeah. What could you be better doing with that time? Just yell it out. Flowing? I mean, sure, I guess you could be using cross-X, to do it and simultaneously catch up on your flow. Not what I was expecting, but sure. What else? Provide more information. What else? Prep? What? All right. Okay. Cool. Anything else? You could prep. Tables of yeah. You do not remember cross-X. This whole thing about this is my cross-X. That's not just the person answering questions. That's the cross-examination. If you are being asked questions, this is your cross-X too. Don't stay quiet. Don't let the judge get bored. Take advantage of this time to keep showing up on the other team, flexing your stuff. Keep backing up your arguments. Keep the judge interested and stand out. Honestly, even if it kind of looks bad to the judge that there's so much talking happening from one person, it seems like rambling, and the other person is just not answering questions and they're getting bored. It looks way worse, and it's way more boring to the judge when they're just sitting there waiting for something to happen. If the other team isn't using up that cross-X time, that's your cross-X time. You use that time to shine, to be showing up the other team and stuff. Yes?
See that you use it to your advantage. Couldn't they make it claim that you're being abusive or something?
So if I was up here and I had another team ask what are they gonna say? Hey, shut up! Stop talking. If they're not answering questions, at the point where they're not talking, they're not saying I'm abusive because they're not talking in the first place. Yeah.
But how if I don't know, they really need to have something against you. So they'll be like, oh, they weren't even asking us questions, they're just explaining that one. And I cross-examine.
So the question is, when you're being cross-examined, but you just keep talking while they're quiet, can the other...
Okay, you're saying don't stay quiet, right?
Yeah.
To further continue explaining.
Right.
Your evidence.
If they're just taking forever to ask the next question.
And it wouldn't make sense for them to be like, oh, that's not right.
Yeah, because it's just if I'm quiet, and if I ask the question hey, how was your day, blah, 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 and then you answer, and I'm just oh, cool. You just keep talking. If you keep talking and I'm not saying anything, just, hey, shut up, stop that. They're not really in a position to tell you to stop talking because they're not asking a question. You're answering it's just if they're staying quiet, you just continue answering their question. The last question they asked, if they stay quiet after that, even if there's that awkward silence where you're just blah, 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 here's my answer, they stay quiet, keep talking. Just keep going. If they call you out on abuse, Sorry, that's just a really funny image in my head. It's just like, you're abusing yourself. Huh?
So like you just about the question, like the question, we just continue talking about the question they just asked.
Yeah.
Anything.
Yeah, like honestly, like cross-examination is a speech. There's never such a thing as enough time in policy debate. Having enough time to argue or explain something once you get to the higher levels. Use that time to be doing the stuff that you could have included in your speech but didn't. Literally, if like you need to continue explaining like a DA internal link that they've like accidentally touched upon, or they're asking about your solvency, this is an opportunity for you to really flesh out that solvency and put you ahead, while the other team is both trying to listen to what you're saying and figure out their own shiznits, Any other questions? I never thought in at least 10 years when I'm like rich and famous and stuff that I get like 10 applauses in one lecture. It feels kind of. But the thing is, y'all, I don't know if it counts though, because you keep clapping when it's not debate related. It's just like when we're doing things. Alright. So we have about 9 minutes left. We can either ask Moses, stop! You started that! I saw you! I should be adding up. I should just like screw over my lab and like whoever and like the amount of tallies we like gathered. Like that's how many minutes of spreading jills we do. I saw some people stop clapping. But yeah, so I just like how everyone was like, yeah, we like clapping for Cedric, and then they're like, oh, he's gonna get, let's just screw over this one lab. Like, but Cedric's lab. Wait, we had a name for our lab. What was it? Like bathwater? Bathwater is the name of it. Anyway, so we got about 8 minutes left. Question? For sure, yeah. Take your time before you ask or answer a question. I like it.
So, when you were like, so like you're answering the question.
Yeah.
Like they say, like they're continuing. If you're asking the question and the other team is like rambling.
Yeah.
How do you just tell them to stop talking without like talking?
Well, honestly, if the other team is cooperative and is genuinely trying to work with you, they'll stop talking. The only reason they would keep talking is that they're already being rude. You are probably justified in being just a little bit more assertive or a tiny bit more aggressive because you're not like initiating being rude. Like you're not the one who started it. He started it. Like no, like that kind of puts you like the judge should understand like if they're being uncooperative, like you're just kind of putting your foot down. Just what's your name? Izzy? Like if Izzy just keeps talking about how wonderful his DA is, oh my god, tell me more about how this permutation doesn't work for the CP, blah, blah, blah. It's just like, okay, like, can I just, Izzy? Like, you said, yeah, like, you can literally sometimes saying their first name works, sometimes just literally telling them, like, okay, I have next question, or like, thank you. Saying thank you, next question, or like I gotta move on, or honestly just be like, okay, like don't talk that way. Don't talk while I'm talking. I'm asking questions. Sorry, that wasn't me roasting whoever was in the bed. But you see how it works? I wasn't even trying. That was by accident and it worked. We made it to 15. But yeah. Any other questions? What's your name? Andrew. If the other team is not messing up, but they're answering pretty well, what's the best way to maintain credibility? See, this is more like basic stuff, but It honestly depends round to round. Honestly, yeah, I love those debates when both teams are just super on top of their stuff, and both teams are like super fire at answering questions, the other one's fire at asking questions. Like, yeah, I mean, I would just say, stay cool, stay cool. Oh, there's also this cool trick, like, other team is here sitting down at this desk. Me and my partner are sitting right here prepping. Sometimes people will ask questions from their desk, like, just staying down like this, like, what's the status of the CP, this and that. Sometimes it comes off a bit stronger, not to be ableist or anything, but it's just true. We live in an ableist world, and standing up does signify more power, more social and discursive and rhetorical power. Standing up, asking questions like this, or actually check this out. Imagine they're sitting there, I'm sitting here, and I did this. And I just come up here, and I start asking questions with like, my partner's there, my partner's there, other team's there, I just come up. What does this do? What does this look like? Does that seem, who looks stronger? It's sort of me, like, yeah, like, they come up here, like, and if I just walk up, they're gonna be like, the fuck? Like, yeah, like, he's walking up there, like, in front of the judge, you're like, I'm putting myself closer to the judge, it's more of a connection. If the other third person comes up and walks up here, sometimes it's funny because, like, you don't want to do this thing where you're just like, so, sometimes the exact opposite works. They're up here, just be like, and then they're just, where did you go? All right. Yeah. Sometimes it's just about making yourself stand out. A little intimidation can go a long way too. But yeah. Any other questions? Chairs? Oh, yeah. I mean, like, I don't really have a lot of friends, up here at least, so, like, there's no one sitting with me. We were talking about chairs. What is the... Because... Oh, you felt bad for me. We're done. Wow, 19. All right, you're pretty much free to go for lunch.